dressed.
Thanks for coming on, Mike.
I wanted to give you some chaos in your podcast.
Yeah, that's
so
perfect.
that's what I'm here for.
That's perfect. It's great having you on, and my crack pipe staff did their background research. There's a lot of things as well as I know you, there's a few things that I didn't know, and I'd like you to talk to the listeners about that.
Can I start with the 3 things that I love about our friendship, which has lasted now, I think, 30 years?
Lasted a few breaks. We've had a few breaks.
A few timeouts, or is it times out? But number 1, our divergent backgrounds were so different from where we came and how we were raised.
For sure.
You were one of the 10 kids of the great Fred Abood.
Right.
Number 2, you love the color blue. I think that's very cosmopolitan, and you've got a soft heart that a lot of people don't know about.
Right.
And then number 3, of course, has got to be in the top 3. You own a bar.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, we've known each other for a long time and been fortunate to handle some big cases, some small cases. They've all been big when you've been involved. We've made them big, but you grew up in Roscommon, right?
Yeah, I went to Roscommon schools, but really I grew up on Higgins Lake, kind of near Higgins Lake.
Well, Higgins Lake is beautiful, but I don't think you were on the other side of the tracks of Higgins.
For sure.
Higgins Lake. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we were dirt poor, and I moved up there with my parents in about 72, right before I started kindergarten, because my grandfather took over this campground mobile home park. So for roughly 6 years, I lived in a box on wheels with skirting. You know what skirting is?
Oh, that sort of differentiates the ground from the house, right?
It's the only thing.
Yeah.
And it's this little, not even 2-inch thick plastic with grooves in it that helps with snow somehow. I don't know, but it was, to say, a Spartan existence. But when you're a kid, you don't know at that age, right? I mean, the window of your world is limited to, do I get to watch TV for another 2 hours, and do I get to eat more Hydrox? We didn't have Oreos. In fact, sometimes we couldn't even afford Hydrox. We just would buy boxes of black and white cookies.
And so you lived there, but you grew up and went to school there, correct?
Yes.
And
my entire school experience, primary school, was Roscommon School
involved
system.
in sports.
Yes.
Love of basketball.
Loved basketball.
And baseball.
Loved baseball.
Did you play those sports?
I did.
And your mom, as I understand it, and your dad separated at some point?
Yes. Well, their marriage was kind of rocky because I think they got married so young. They were 20. They got married because, so Mom gets pregnant with me to get back at my grandfather because he wouldn't let her go to France and study French. And she was a sophomore at Bowling Green State University. And Vietnam is raging. My uncle got drafted and he was in combat. And my dad thought, hey, if I have a kid, that's a get out of Vietnam free pass. And so I saved him from Vietnam. So their marriage was rocky for almost the entire existence. And that's kind of where basketball came in. I could go shoot baskets and I could zone all that out.
And did you play organized basketball?
Yes.
And
I played for the Roscommon Bucks.
High school?
Yes.
And baseball?
And baseball. I was captain of our team my senior year. Couldn't hit for crap, but,
And what position did you play?
I played center field. I pitched. I played left field. I could play first. I could play all the positions, but, because I was a lefty and fairly short, I got the outfield.
Maybe fast.
Yeah, it was,
Decent speed. Yeah. Did you know then that you wanted to be in the law?
No way. Hated school.
Any opportunity to, cross paths with lawyers or anybody who mentored you, any teachers that said, you might want to consider a career in law?
Oh God, no. It was probably the opposite. I was probably that kid who the teacher would say, maybe you're not high school material. Maybe you might want to think about a trade and go to the trade school over here.
Academics were different back then.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was a good writer, and I think some of my teachers maybe caught that, but nobody ever really said, hey, why don't you think about going to college, let alone law school?
And certainly your parents, I don't think, had a 529 or some account say.
Oh, no. My dad said, it's the Marines or figure it out. You can come work at the plant with me. He worked for a little, like an auto parts supplier in Roscommon called ITT Hancock. I remember a conversation with him in the front seat of his truck, and he said, hey, I can get you in with Jimmy over at the plant. And I was just seeing this Bruce Springsteen song revealed in my head and playing out, and I just thought, no, Dad, I don't need you to do that.
And at some point, your mom goes back to school?
She goes back to school right around the turn of the 1990s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would have been almost 30,
yeah.
Almost 30 by then or so.
I was actually in my early 20s. I was born in 67, so that would have been around 22, 23.
Right. My math is off.
Yeah. Well, lawyer math.
Yeah, right. So at some point you go to Michigan State.
I did go to Michigan State, yes.
Did you go to a community college at all?
I went to Lansing Community College.
There you go.
First, I went to Kirtland Community College because after high school, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, I was working as a clerk in a party store, the Evergreen Park Grocery Store, which is on the north side of Higgins Lake, right by B&B Marina. And I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. And this opportunity came up where you could work at a radio station or any business, and you get a certificate in something or other, business and industry, I forget. But so I get this job working part-time at WQON, and I'm going to Kirtland Community College. I took 4 classes.
And Kirtland is where?
Kirtland is, it started kind of just north of Roscommon, kind of between Roscommon and St. Helen, Mayo, in the woods, basically. Right. Now it's right, between Higgins Lake and Grayling, right off 75. It's become pretty, not, LCC big, but it's gotten a lot bigger.
Right.
And so I thought, yeah, I'll do this and see where it goes and maybe get into news and sports. I thought maybe I'll be a sports broadcaster, and that was the start.
Did you always know you were going to go to college or continue your education after high school?
No. I probably my goal was stay out of prison when I was 18. That was probably the goal, and figure out what I could do to make myself. I wanted to make a difference.
Were you on your own when you were 18?
I moved out of the house in March of 87, and I'll never forget that because my mom said to me, there's no coming back. And at first I was really pissed, right? I mean, What kind of a thing is that for a mom to say to her kid? But then I realized that was the best thing she ever said to me.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I'll never forget the conversation in the living room. We upgraded from the mobile home to a double wide in about 1979. And I'm standing there in 1987, and I'm looking at her. I said, I can always come back if it doesn't work out, because I got a job at a radio station in St. John's. And she said, no, there's no coming back. There's not going to be a place for you here.
And she said it maybe out of love, and you didn't realize it.
I think she said it because she knew her and Dad were actually finally going to get divorced, and the divorce was maybe not started, but about to get started, and the house was, of course, going to get sold, and she was going to move to Cadillac and finish school at Ferris State University, and she had to start thinking about herself and not raising her kids.
Right. And so you at some point decide to go to Michigan State,
Yes.
and you have to borrow money to do that, student loans, or
I paid my way through Michigan State working at, again, I'm still in radio, and I worked at the Great Lakes Media Group, which was the Michigan News Network. That was kind of what I was, the division, I guess, that I was working in.
not sports, but news.
Right. We had the contract to do the Pistons broadcast because it was one of the few satellites at that time of that nature. You have to have a certain kind of satellite to distribute, and so I would produce Pistons basketball games, and that would pay me a little extra money, and that's kind of how I paid my way through.
Production means
Well, you got to run. These guys know. Well, maybe they
Right.
don't. I don't know. We'll find out when this thing gets on playback. But you're kind of making sure the commercials get played when they're supposed to play. You tell George Blaha, hey, we got to take a station or a station identification break at the top of the hour, and
so not in front of the mic, but sort of behind the scenes. Everything that it takes to get
It's-
the talent able to produce. the
it's called
broadcast,
it's called running the board.
running the board.
Yeah.
At some point, you get in front of the camera.
Yeah, that's right. I finished. I go to LCC. I take every single credit hour I can possibly take at LCC. I get accepted into Michigan State, which was a huge thing for me. I mean, high school, Mike, is never going to get accepted into Michigan State. I mean, I think I had maybe a 2 point in high school thanks to sewing class.
Right.
So I finish at Michigan State, and I get a job at WWJ in Detroit. And this is an interesting part, because this is the pinnacle. This is a CBS owned and operated station. It's the Tiffany Network. You're going to go work for CBS News.
Right.
And I hated it.
And so at some point at Michigan State, you decide you want to stay in the TV business or radio business, right?
Yeah. So I, even when I got the job in Detroit, this is summer of '94, right? Yeah. My wife at the time was working on her master's and working in Lansing, and I didn't want to leave Lansing, so we lived in Williamston because I just kind of I don't want to say got comfortable here, but there's a lot to love about this community, the mid-Michigan area. And so I eventually got a job at Channel 10, which is the NBC affiliate, not NBC owned, but it's
Right.
an affiliate of NBC. And that was fall of '94.
And now you're in front of the camera.
And now I'm in front of the camera. I'm a reporter and then eventually a reporter anchor.
Any inklings about becoming a lawyer at that point?
Still not. This is an example of why life is about relationships, because a friend of mine who I met at the Great Lakes Media Group, who actually helped get me the job there, kind of got me the job at Channel 10. And that was you don't make squat. People have a big misperception about TV news. You don't make anything, at least at the local news level. And but then I started.
It hasn't ever got better, really, for those people.
No, only worse.
Starting out.
Yeah, it's worse. And then comes the, how we met story.
Right. So probably in '96.
Yeah.
So a couple years later, you're thinking about law school. Were you in law school then?
I started at Cooley in the night program May of 1995, so almost 30 years ago.
And tell me what it was about, you now have several years in the radio and TV business. What was it that you decided, I'm going to do a career change, when really you have little to no buddy in your life who's a lawyer?
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with my younger brother about going to law school, and he was like, "How the you going to pay for that?" And I said, "I'll figure it out. I can get scholarships and loans. I'll figure it out." And I'm thinking at that time that I'm going to go to law school and use that to advance my journalism career. I'm going to, move to D.C. and I'm going to be like, some of the big
Bernie Shaw.
They're lawyers. The people who on TV and on radio, from Nina Totenberg, Bernie Shaw. You can name a lot of big names who are lawyers.
Right.
Greta Van Susteren, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I'm going to do. And I remember sitting there in Professor Stockmeyer's Contracts 2 class. So it's second semester. We're now in the summer. And I just was getting so disillusioned with TV news that I just say to myself, I'm really afraid of taking the bar exam. It scares the what out of me. But I think I'm going to try being a lawyer and get into the battle, get into the arena instead of just talking about people who are in the arena and covering cases.
That's and so something. I don't get it. Something inside of you said, I can do this. I can become a lawyer. And then something tells you not only can you become a lawyer, but you can practice law. Even though you, as best as I can tell, never seen anybody. You knew some lawyers, obviously.
Right.
But you never seen it in real life. But you wanted to be a lawyer all of a sudden.
I remember in like 6th grade going to a basketball camp. I don't remember the coach's name, but he coached one of the Division III colleges in Michigan. And I remember him giving us a lecture. We're all in the gymnasium. And he says, there are the 3 most powerful words. Because my dad was not encouraging of my athletic pursuits at all, or anything other than going to work at a plant. And he says there are 3 of the most powerful words, in fact, the 3 most powerful words that you will ever say to yourself, and they are these 3 words: yes, I can.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so I would watch lawyers in court, some really good lawyers, some really not so good lawyers, and I would think to myself, yes, I can. I can do that. I can do that.
And so you're in law school 95 to 98, 99. Was
December, yeah, because in the 2-night-a-week program, right, your credit hours are controlled. You can only do like 8 to 10. There were 2 semesters you had to do 10, but the rest it was 8 credit hour semesters. So December of 98 is when I think I actually walked to get the world's largest law degree.
And how long did you work in television?
I left television October of 98 because I had a clerkship offered to me, which was a huge mistake to do that at that point. But, wisdom is learning from your mistakes and still living.
Right.
Living through them and realizing, okay, I probably should have done this differently.
Right. But one of the most interesting things, or one of your greatest assets, is what I attribute your experience of being on TV and your ability to articulate a question or a statement without any pauses or hesitation your questions and your arguments are so clean and clear. And maybe you learned that from someplace else, but do you attribute any of that to being on TV and, having something specific you have to say and to get it out and to get that message across?
Oh, 100%, because you have to be able to see things in your head, play them out, memorize those lines. Mm-hmm. You don't want to see a reporter in a live shot reading their steno notebook. That's just not interesting.
Right.
And it doesn't, Aristotle's 3 points of persuasion. You don't get the respect of the audience thinking, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. You get that from commanding your information, your material.
And I think I noticed that maybe that one of the first times watching you in court, it was like, man, his questioning is so clean. It's so, not saying it was super high thought or super low thought. I just wanted to emulate it. Like it's there's no or or nothing lazy about the way you're saying the words or your English. Everything was articulated, clean and clear. And I thought the only way he could have picked this up is that TV stuff that you had done.
I would say to any lawyer who is just getting started or you want to be a lawyer, read your own transcripts because you will see things that make you cringe.
Right.
You see the ums or the, in awkwardly phrased questions. I'll still read a transcript and I'll say, I probably should have done that a little bit differently or better.
Right. But I mean, even if you can cringe, one of the hard things to do is figure out how to fix it.
Right.
I mean, just because you make mistakes and you can recognize the mistake doesn't mean that you can then correct it on your own. And that's something that's a sort of another phase, because I have had the benefit of watching your career for the better part of
26 years.
Yeah, 26 years. And the hard thing about this business is it's easy to lie to yourself about how good you are.
Right.
You can say I did a great job, but how do you measure yourself and whether you did a great job on a case?
And there, obviously you get a not guilty on a criminal case. That's the ultimate measurement.
Right.
In a way. Or a really good result. Or if you're a lawyer on a PI case, the number that you walk away with for your client. But, I mean, to me, I like to just feel like everything that happened, I sort of saw happening right at the very first client meeting or the subsequent days. You kind of see how that's going to unfold if you prepare every day.
Right.
Or the night before for the next day.
So you get a case, right?
Yeah, you get a case.
Pick a strategy.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And then you try and execute on it.
Right.
Right? And that's something that I'd like to hear you talk about a little bit. How do, in a business that you can constantly tell yourself you did a great job, the client this or the judge that or the other side, how do you objectively hold yourself accountable to get better?
When I first started getting into my main practice area that I'm known for, which is drunk driving defense, so many times a prosecutor or a judge would say, whoa, we're going to try this case? Because the easiest thing to do is just do a plea.
And just so it's clear for the listeners, OWIs are plot out all the time. I mean, there can't be another area of the law where there's so many people that get pulled over in this area and every other area for an OWI where they get pled out to an impaired, right?
Right. And the hardest thing to do is to execute, as you put it. I remember, years ago when I was first, I made the commitment to start trying them and filing motions. There's going to come a point in time I got to tell a prosecutor, who might be a very nice person, with a reasonable plea offer, no, we're going to fight this case. We're going to have a trial. And then the judge wants to hear, I remember a case, Judge DeLuca, what? We're going to try this? You remember that case?
Yeah, I was obviously not your co-counsel, but I watched you try the case.
With the jury selection. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I thought Judge DeLuca was going to come over the bench at me. But, you got to play in your head the night before that commitment that we're here to try the case. We told the client we're going to try the case. That's what the client wants. They want to take their shot for whatever reason. And you got to tell the other side, we got to do this work. Sorry.
Right. You don't sometimes have to say sorry. I generally don't say it.
No, I don't know if I've ever heard you say. Maybe I have heard you say sorry.
But, what people don't understand is, when you come in and you're wearing a high-priced suit and you're the high-priced lawyer and, you're in private practice and maybe sometimes your name is in the paper, do you ever get the feeling that you're not the underdog?
Do I ever get the feeling that I'm not the underdog on a criminal case? I think every time they look at me like the underdog. But if you work hard enough to know how this thing can play out, if everything falls into place, this witness says that, like we expect him to, that cross-examination is going to go like X, Y, and Z. I don't ever feel surprised at a not guilty verdict, I mean,
right.
That's the way it should be because you're prepared.
Yeah. I think often if you're hoping for a not guilty, it's probably going to be guilty.
Right.
And if you're usually when you have a quiet sense of confidence, that went the way I wanted it to go.
Absolutely.
But when you walk in on that first day, whether it's jury selection or opening statement, don't you always feel like you're the underdog against the government?
Oh, yeah, because the government has all of the resources. And most of the time, the person in the black robe is there to protect the government's right to a fair trial, so to speak, and not, okay, well, I'm not going to make the defendant testify. I'm going to tell the jury the defendant doesn't have to testify, but beyond that, you're on your own.
Right. And you're not sometimes just battling one prosecutor in the room, right?
Many times, yeah.
You've been fortunate to have some great mentors.
Yes.
Let's talk about those.
Okay.
We all know maybe your first one, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but FHR, right?
Frank Harrison Reynolds, yes,
right.
sir.
And, when in this town, if you're a lawyer and you say Frank, everybody still knows exactly who you're talking about, right?
Even though he's been retired for, 6, 7 years now? I think so, yeah.
Yeah, maybe longer, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
In his heyday, you worked for him,
Yes.
right? And you still have a close relationship with him today.
Yes, I probably should text him or call him and see what's up. But yeah, man, and that's part of what drove me to decide to be a trial attorney, take the bar and do it was, I watched Frank handle that messenger case. Remember that doctor who was charged with manslaughter, I think, because he pulled the plug on his child in the incubator. That was a huge case, man.
It sure was. That was on the mezzanine level of City Hall.
Yes. 90, man, was that 95? 90, 94 maybe. It was 94.
Right. And so in this business, a profession, mentors and proteges are often how you learn how to practice, right?
Right.
And tell me how your relationship with Frank developed.
So I covered his cases, and I got to know him, and I think he understood that maybe I knew more than the average, newbie reporter at 22, 23, whatever, because I did have some exposure to the law in law school. And before that even, I was fascinated because I was pre-law at Michigan State, and I was, really getting into both politics and law, legal developments at the time. I mean, this is when Jack Kevorkian is Jeff Feiger representing
national news,
international news, and so we would have some conversations here and there. And I watched him do a second big trial, and I remember walking into the courtroom at City Hall for the prelim, and sitting there is my professor, Otto Stockmeyer. I mean, that's how big the case was.
Right.
And I remember just thinking, man, he is so prepared. There's nothing he's not ready for. And even if there is, he doesn't act like it. He acts like, okay, I knew this was coming, or I'm ready to deal with this. Some really adverse, poor decisions by the first judge, who should have recused himself but didn't. Remember that?
Judge Jordan.
Judge Jordan. And that's the how we met story.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when I first met you, and I interviewed you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You did some amazing lawyering, and you were brand new, right?
96, I would have been, would have been 97. Would have been the year 97. So I had been a lawyer 7 years, and I had clerked for the Supreme Court. I passed the bar in May of 1990.
And I remember thinking, I got to interview that. You got a writ of superintending control, which I had no idea what that was.
To stop the proceedings.
You came walking in with that in your hand, and I see Frank Reynolds turning around. I don't work for Frank at this time. I'm just a TV news reporter, also a radio stringer and a law student sitting next to my law professor, and I'm going, what's going on? And he said, I think something big really happened. You might want to go interview those guys. And so I interviewed you.
That's great.
I interviewed you. And I said, well, okay, what just happened?
There was a lot of people in that courtroom that day.
Packed. It was absolutely packed. It was really, really a sight. It was something I'll never forget, ever.
So sometime you go to work for him.
Yes.
When was that?
To April 3rd, 2001, which is also the date that we last won the national championship at Michigan State basketball.
Oh, my God. You'll never forget that day.
No, it was amazing.
And how long did you work for Frank?
For 5 years. I left in May 2005.
And you, fair to say you learned almost everything from him.
Drank water from a fire hose for 5 years.
And tell me what some of his, legal principles that he would try and impress upon you.
Number one, you may not be able to control the outcome, but no one's going to outwork you in the courtroom. And if that's sort of the guiding light for you, then you'll be fine. Your client will never be disappointed, even if they're disappointed in the outcome. They will know that they had somebody fighting for them, advocating for them, standing up for them. And if you can't, if the guy is standing over the dead person with a smoking gun in his hand, sometimes you can't really expect to win that case, right? Sometimes you just get bad facts.
Right. But Frank won his share of cases, that's for sure.
Yes. And those days, the celebrations were always a little bit muted, but you had 24 hours to enjoy it, and then, you move on. If I remember losing my first trial that I did there, and he put an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper on my door with a big L on it. And he wasn't being mean, but he was just saying, okay, there's a difference between really good effort and winning the case.
Yeah, it's a little bit of,
motivation,
and probably from Frank, it might, okay, it's a piece of paper, it hurts, but pick yourself up, kind of like your mom saying, you're not coming back.
Right.
Frank is probably saying, this isn't the end of the world,
Right.
Did you try any cases with Frank?
We tried a couple of cases together, and I remember my first capital case with Judge Glazier. He sort of watched from the background. It was really a difficult case with a difficult set of facts, difficult parents, because the parents were paying the freight, and the parents were kind of known in the community. And he went to prison, and that sucked, man. I lost sleep for about 3 days. Yeah. And but Frank was constantly giving me feedback, phone calls at the end of the day. Why did you do that? That didn't come across real well. Tell me what your thought process was. Make you think through.
Yeah, that's tough to take sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
You always second guess yourself, and when somebody else is doing it, it can really weigh on you. But if it's done in a positive manner, it can be really helpful down the road.
And to your point, it's very easy to look back and say, hey, I did a good job. Today was a great day.
Right.
But you got to be able to say, here's what I should have done differently. I got to figure out how to clean up that little mess later on in the case.
And I think that's significant because in this job, right, we're always trying to get better.
You should.
I mean,
1% better
right?
at least.
And the art of getting better, there's no algorithm for it, right?
Right.
But
Right.
one thing I think that you do is you constantly try and objectively evaluate, what you did, what you wanted to do, where, how was it effective, all those things, right?
Right. Right. And that process of self-improvement, which is, I think, why they call it the practice, I think it's one part self-evaluation, but every one part of self-evaluation has to be 2 parts positive affirmation, right? Like, I can come back from this. This doesn't mean that I am a horrible lawyer, that I'm committing malpractice, but it means I got to figure out how to do this better the next time. Or if you're in the middle of a multi-day trial, this witness did not go well. How can we clean that up?
Right. I had a lot of, not a ton of interaction with Frank. We did some cases together. Obviously, you're familiar with the Holland case, and
Yes.
we sat side by side. But one of the impactful things that Frank said to me one time, it was a Saturday, we were in the office, and it was probably the early 90s, or could have been when I was in law school in the 80s. And we had gone over to Dimitri's. Frank's office used to be in the 101
Right,
building on Washington.
downtown, yep.
What used to be the First of America building. And we had eaten at Dimitri's, and Frank was walking back to our office. And at the time, if you did criminal defense, you did drug cases.
Right. There was a
And
lot of drugs going on.
A lot of drugs,
Yeah.
and there was the Tri-County Metro team, and cocaine and marijuana were, you could make a good living. And my dad had decided not to do any more drug cases.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't want them. He didn't want the association, and he didn't like the scrutiny. And he knew that if you were a high-powered guy who was representing drug dealers, eventually the government would come after you. And quite frankly, at the time, my 3 siblings were with the firm, and I just think he didn't want the exposure. But I remember walking down Allegan Street, and Frank said to me, "I'm just a $50,000 law clerk of your dad." And I laughed because I'm almost certain that Frank got almost all we did some nickel and dime marijuana cases, but we weren't doing any of the cocaine cases. But he was obviously very close to my dad, and they had a really good relationship. And I think that's part of the practice in the profession. And I know that you have good relationships with everybody. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, you're right. Fred Abood and Frank Reynolds did have a special relationship, and I think Frank just loved, watching all you guys grow up, and I know that he would make jokes, but he did that with all of us, right?
Right.
I remember him cracking up when you were doing a cross-examination at the prelim in the Holland case, when you were dropping terms like skeletonized, and how was something skeletonized? That was great, but. We're all in this together, and it's a super stressful profession, especially
and adversary.
And adversarial, right? I mean, we've had cases where we've been on opposite sides. You have got to appreciate that at the end of the day, we all need to make each other better. We all need to survive and thrive in this profession. And we know things about what we do that people who aren't lawyers just don't have an appreciation for. And an example is the 3 a.m., okay, what is that on my ceiling after all? Because you're wide awake in the middle of the night trying to figure out what you're going to do the next day on this case. This judge is going to be upset, or, you got to figure out how to cross-examine this witness. And having relationships with people, whether you work with them in the same office or you just see them out in cases a lot, I think that's so huge. That's so important, because that's that matters a whole lot more than, any revenue that comes in or any getting one case that somebody else got that you didn't get. What matters is being able to have other people who you can commiserate with and share that experience, that human experience. Because, being a lawyer is a human experience. You deal with people.
And you try and create sometimes an emotional response from the jury. And if you can't connect to other people in a social relationship, sometimes it's hard to do it in a formal setting, like a courtroom.
How are you going to persuade 12 people to maintain the status quo in a case? Or how are you going to persuade 12 people to give your client the amount of money that you're asking for, whether it's, $100,000 or $100 million, if you can't even interact with your fellow human beings over a cup of coffee or a beer?
Right. So you leave Frank in 2005, and you go to work for Pat Gallagher?
We were of counsel, but yeah, it was Pat Gallagher at the Gallagher Law Firm.
Right.
And that was, just kind of 18 months of seeing what was next and whether I could handle being on my own. At that time, I was talking to some big firms about coming on board, because every big firm benefits from having somebody who can do criminal defense on a high level and who's not afraid to go to trial.
Especially the big firms.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was close in a couple of occasions, and I talked to you about working for you, and then, I sort of stole one of your associates, and that was probably the best thing I ever did, which was decide to say no to the opportunity to go to a big firm and then start a firm with Wendy, who at that time was your longest serving associate.
And tell me when you started.
Tell me when you're going to forgive me, by the way, for pulling her away.
Once you work at the Abood law firm, you never leave.
You're always part of the Abood law firm family. She will reflect on some Fred Abood stories.
I remember when I interviewed her. I remember when she started. I remember she was always a go-getter, never afraid to go to court, never said no, tried cases, learned a lot, great lawyer. I commiserated with her losses. I still hold Judge Brown responsible when he gave a JNOV to Bill Schultz on a $35,000 award that she got, and other cases. I remember that era well, and when she left, it wasn't a surprise because I knew you guys were in a relationship. But at some point, you opened your own firm, and would that have been at the beginning of 2006?
The first day in the Nichols Law Firm in the building that we're in now was the first day of trial in the Holland case. But let's just take a step back for the listener. JNOV means judgment notwithstanding the verdict. Wendy did a really good job. She got a jury verdict on a dog bite case.
Car accident. Grand River. A girl was hit by a pedestrian, hit by a car. The driver was at fault. She broke her leg. It was a pretty good case, and it was just when some angler appointee had come out on the no-fault issue about serious impairment.
Right.
And ultimately, after trial, Judge Brown found that it wasn't a serious impairment.
Well, Wendy was literally walking out of the courtroom with the jury verdict in hand when the defense attorney, Bill Schultz from Foster Swift, made the motion. And just like that, the verdict is reversed. And the lesson that we talk about is you can't run out of the courtroom fast enough.
Right.
When something good happens, get the out before somebody changes their mind.
Right, exactly. And so, 2006 was a big year for you.
My dad died. We started the firm. We had gotten married at the end of 2005, so we're in like the first year of our marriage. We're building the building that we're in, and that whole summer we were litigating the out of the world's most notorious murder case.
And tell me why you thought you could be in private practice. Mike Nichols from Roscommon, Michigan.
Right.
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 You know, grew up in a trailer park.
Well,
right.
Well, number one.
And I don't say that. I say that out of maybe, not I don't want to say jealousy, but out of respect for the fact that it's definitely a different path than I took.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Different journeys, and you can't begrudge people, which was hard for me to do. Begrudge people who grew up with means when you grew up with crap on a good day.
Right.
But a couple things. Number one, it couldn't get any worse than it was when I was a kid growing up. I mean, we never had anything. If we got a new pair of Wranglers from JCPenney, that was a good week. Number two, the words of the coach in 6th grade at basketball camp at, I believe it was Central Michigan University, yes, I can. And number three, and maybe part of it was the experience with the Gallagher Law Firm, you know, these guys can do it, I can do it too. And I'm not,
right.
you know, belittling anybody. I'm just saying there's no magic that they possess that I don't. It's all just the grind, the hard work.
Right.
Does the day end in Y? Yeah. Okay. I got to accomplish this, that, or the other thing for my practice and for my business.
Those must have been some sleepless nights.
If I slept 4 hours a night, it was a good night.
Because you had no necessarily guaranteed income coming in, right?
Right.
You had a ex-wife
And child support.
and child support and 2 children that would have been in middle school, maybe?
No.
High school?
Lauren was 6 and Christian was
Well, young.
4.5.
Yeah, so you had a lot of child support.
Had a lot on my plate, brother. And,
Yeah.
you know, on that case, the Holland case, we weren't getting paid. I mean,
Not a lot. We got paid something over time.
well,
but it
remember
was expensive.
that it was July or August. We moved to have her declared indigent, and then
Yes.
I agreed to continue on the court-appointed list.
Right.
And you and I mean, I was your co-counsel. I was your
Yeah.
bag man.
Yeah, and so that would have been like February of '06. We're retained on the case, and I think I brought you in almost.
It was 05.
'05 was.
Oh, no, wait, you're right. You're right. It was 06. Sorry.
Yeah, '05. In July of '05 is when Ricky goes missing, and they do a 6-month investigation. About February of '06, sometime maybe January is when they charged her, and you went on your honeymoon, I think.
Right, during the prelim, with your permission. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you let me go because, you know, that's very big of you. That shows you do have a big heart.
You advocated for it, but I can't remember. Was that a 15-day preliminary exam?
It was longer than that.
Yeah.
It was weeks. It was probably, I mean, you remember there was an article in the Detroit Free Press that writer, Jack, I can't remember his last name.
Kresnak.
Yeah, Jack Kresnak did an article because the prelim was taking so long. The prosecutor was making maybe glacial progress with his proofs.
Right.
Because I think, you know, both the mom and the dad, so Frank and Scott Merton's client, the dad, our client, the mom, I mean, we were fighting them at every turn because we thought it was, you know, ridiculous to charge them with what they had. And in the middle of that prelim, I said, hey, man, do you mind if Wendy's got the ski trip planned, and I don't really ski, but she wants me to learn how to ski. And you said, yeah, I'll handle it.
You went to Aspen, right?
We went to Park City, Utah.
Oh, Park City, Utah.
And it was out there. We were in Park City. We had to go someplace to use a fax machine to fax our signatures on the purchase agreement to buy that lot.
Oh, right.
Right? That we built the building on that we're in now. And, you know.
Big year for you. It was a big year.
You know, we would go to court. I mean, we had to do our prep at night and our phone calls and stuff to talk about the next day. But, you know, I would get back from court. I would go to the office at some point to try to, you know, got to return this phone call, meet with this person, because I got to try to keep some money coming in by working with current clients or getting new clients.
How did I convince you to help me with that case?
Oh, man, it was so easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I even gave you the Mike Nichols discount, right?
Tell the listeners a little bit about the case.
Well, you're right. 4th of July of '05, I came back from my first long weekend with Wendy, where she teaches me how to jet ski up on whatever that lake is, and over by Oscoda, Van Etten Lake, maybe Cedar Lake. And then I come back, and I like to keep up with the news, so I get the State Journal, and I'm getting it, subscribed, and I'm reading this thing, and this kid has disappeared, and the parents say, you last see him on this time, and so there's this search party county-wide. Where's Ricky? And the parents say, we don't know, he disappeared. And so that goes on. There's an investigation, and they retain a lawyer who writes a bunch of nasty grams, and that got law enforcement really jacked up. Remember that?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, they hated our clients with a passion.
Yeah, Roy Halladay.
Roy Halladay.
Detective.
And so
Frank Mraz from the state police. And
so it crumbles when the mom and dad get into an argument, and one of them goes to the cops about it. I think dad goes to the cops about it. Next thing you know, stories start flying about what happened to Ricky, right? I mean, that's one of the easiest tactics in the books for the cops, right? Oh,
right.
We got him. He's a captive audience.
Divide and conquer.
And another lawyer came in for Tim and committed malpractice. I remember that. And so she gets arrested, charged, and then I'm not sure if it was February, Andrew, or January, but the weather was really nice. I just finished a case, and you call me and say, hey, I got retained by Lisa, and you said, hey, I'm going to go meet with her at the jail. You want to come with me? And I said, I just finished a 2-week trial. What the heck? Why not?
Right.
Why not jump into another thing?
You were probably doing court-appointed work at that time.
I was doing, because at that time it was just a roster of lawyers who would do cases, and I was on the A list, so I could do murder cases. And I went to the office, the Gallagher Law Firm, made copies of the jury instructions for open murder and murder 1, murder 2, and felony murder. And there we were in the Ingham County Jail that Saturday afternoon, beautiful day, and that was our meeting with our client. And then you said, I can't pay you much, and I said, well, I'll give you a discount if you can just, pay me that month for my invoice.
You did a lot in that case. You got to examine me. You had to put me on the stand. Tell the listeners about that.
Might have been maybe not the most fun I've had as a trial lawyer, but man,
let me give a little.
It's got to be top 5.
Let me give a little background. So I'm out in 55th, and I get told that they've arrested my client, and I'm, waiting for them to call my case in 55th, different client, and that's being delayed. And I walk over to the jail, which is right around the corner, or used to be, and I walk in, and the deputy is taking her time, and they can't find her. I know that she just got picked up that day, so I go walk back over, say I'll be over in a few minutes.
Automatically suspicious, right?
Not really, because everything was so, and although, I don't think that had ever happened before, but she could be in process. She could be anyway. So then I'm back in the courtroom, and I walk back over because I got another break, and, I think although cell phones were still had been around for a little bit, but they weren't, so I might have been getting various phone calls, and I walked back around, and I talked to her again, and she says, I'm not really sure where she is, and she gives me a look, and I don't know how I had the intuition, what it was, but I said, oh, they're interrogating her. And she just looked at me, and I said, I need to see her right now. I need to see her right now. And they walked me in to the room. I had to walk around to the other side. I had to walk through, on the other side to the sheriff's department. I walked through, and I walk in the door, and Roy Halladay is just ending the conversation. And of course, there's some case law out there that says basically you can't delay, even though a lawyer doesn't have a right to a client, if the lawyer is there, you can't interfere with that right. So we file a motion to say, hey, this delay interfered with the client's right to an attorney. And as you know, when you have a motion like that, it's evidentiary, right?
Yeah, so somebody had to testify about what happened, and
Yeah.
we needed someone from our side to
Right,
explain
because
what happened.
we weren't confident that the deputy would, although the deputy was good, she was straightforward about it. I think she documented it. But we still needed to see how much of that interview was going to be admitted.
Yeah, I remember you examining the deputy at that hearing. Was I upset? Well, I wouldn't say you were upset. Well, was I firm that I wanted to see my client? Yeah, I would say you were firm. Was I yelling? You're kind of a yeller, Mr. Abood. Something like that. There's for the listener, so like everybody knows the Miranda versus Arizona case from 62, 64, something like that. But everybody, doesn't really follow the lineage of that right to remain silent. There are some cases that say if somebody sends a lawyer for the person being interrogated, that lawyer says, I'm here to represent that person. They can't just kind of keep maybe,
Right.
A few questions here or there and, we'll get your lawyer back here. You can't do that.
So you've got to now go into a case. You got a lot going on in your life. Tell me about the courtroom.
The courtroom, which one? Aquilina and 55th for the prelim?
No, in front of Manderfield on the motion to suppress.
Okay, yeah. Again, packed courtroom, cameras. I think maybe they had set up a pool feed by then. I don't remember that part. This is pre-trial, and we're talking about it, and, you were pretty, I wouldn't say obsessed with every detail, but you wanted to make sure that we got out what we needed to get out.
Right.
And, I think that might have been the day that we wore the same suit. Remember the old pebble grain material? We each had that blue colored suit.
Yeah.
And you said, I like blue. There's a pretty high probability I'm going to be wearing blue. Now you ruined all the pictures. It's just trying to relax me a little bit because it was, we were both pretty amped up. We're still pretty new in our careers.
Opposing counsel is
Mike Ferenczi.
right.
And Bill Crino, I think, was helping him out by then, maybe,
A little bit,
Yeah.
right.
And somebody else from the prosecutor. I mean, this was a big case for the Ingham County prosecutor. This is Stuart Dunnings is throwing all the stops at this one. And, you can cut the tension with a knife. And I'm just trying to relax. And I'm thinking, I know what I got to get out. I can do this. I'm Frank's guy.
And Manderfield was good to us. She
Judge
was the
Manderfield,
judge.
yep.
She was the judge, but she at least appeared at times that she had a sort of a deference to Mike Ferenczi.
Sure. A lot of judges did because Mike was he had the image that he was there to protect the rights of the accused as well as fight for the prosecution's right to a fair trial and a guilty verdict. It's his style, I think. It was really just a style thing.
Right.
God rest his soul, though. But, and I wasn't really surprised when she granted the motion. Were you?
Tell me about how you felt walking in there, having to examine me, and in that moment, ultimately she had no choice whether she was going to grant part of the motion. I mean, that was pretty clear cut, but you still got a lot riding on it.
Yeah.
You got to put me on the stand. Not easy. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done that, but you probably count number of times you've had to put your co-counsel on the stand to testify, right?
Especially in a big, this is a huge case. It's getting an international following. It's kind of where, the bloggers start, right? It's almost commonplace for people to go on YouTube and drop comments. This is kind of the forerunner of all that. Right. But I remember I'm outside the hall. Judge Manderfield was way down. You get off the elevator and turn right, whatever that courtroom number is, but down at the far end. And I remember thinking, all right, deep breath. See yourself doing it. You're gonna be fine. I'd written out the questions, but I didn't need to read them. I just knew what I was going to ask you, or what I needed to get out. And then I thought, this is going to be a hell of a story down the road. Years to come, this is going to be one of those moments in our lives. And then I remember thinking, this is going to be so fun cross-examining Andrew. And it wasn't a blast in the moment, but as soon as we got done and Judge Manderfield issued because she ruled from the bench, right?
Right. She called us up, said, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And then we went back and she made a ruling.
Yeah. And we won that hearing. That was really a cool moment in my career. And I think yours too. Because, you did something that was hard to do. Because it started with that moment that your intuition turned into action.
Right.
When intuition turns into action, every common person thinking they're just doing what they're supposed to do can make a huge difference in the world.
Because there's not, there are law books on the law, right?
Right.
But, applying that to real life is not always as clear cut. You have the academic setting, but you also have the real life, and it's not always as clear cut as you would think.
Yeah, they don't teach you that in law school either.
Right. Tell me about your examination of Todd Fenton.
That was really surreal. That was out of left field, because I remember growing up, Todd Fenton dated. So I have an Irish sister. She's my aunt, but she's only 4 years older than me. And she dated Todd. Todd's from Roscommon.
Right.
And
Roy's from up there too, right?
Kind of like West Branch, yeah. So in the trailer park, Grandma and Grandpa are next door to us, where Betsy lives with her parents, and she's dating Todd, who was the high school quarterback. And I'm 4 years younger, so I'm starstruck by this guy. And fast forward, 20 years later, here I am cross-examining him on forensic anthropology, because he did an examination of the remains, and the idea was he's going to put forth some sort of a theory. I forget kind of exactly what it was.
It was basically that Ricky had not been fed.
And I went to
failure to thrive.
Failure to thrive. So I went to because of kind of the nature of some of the bone growth, I think.
Right.
So I went to the MSU bookstore and I bought a bunch of textbooks on anthropology, and I had taken Anthropology 340 at Michigan State with Todd's mentor, Norm Sauer, and I also called Dr. Sauer, and he answered a couple questions, and then he said, maybe I shouldn't, be helping you with this. And I just studied, and that cross-examination was probably the best one that I did in the entire trial.
So just so it's clear, when he testified at the prelim, which he did, I cross-examined him because you were on your
honeymoon
trip.
I was in Park City, Utah, yes, learning how to ski.
We strategically switched that up to make him, not necessarily feel uncomfortable, but not be able to anticipate your questioning. And I think you did, initially made him feel comfortable by the fact that you were going to cross-examine him because you were, throughout the case, nice to him.
Right. He was a childhood hero, right? The high school quarterback.
Right. And then by the time the examination was done, I remember he walked over to the prosecutor table and apologized.
I remember that. Yeah.
That was one of your best examinations.
And that's really where I kind of fell in love with the idea of becoming skilled, I guess, in dealing with forensic science.
Yeah, so fast forward to today, that would be 19 years later, right?
Yep.
And you become an expert in OWI, right?
Yep.
And a lot of people don't understand the complexities of an OWI case, right?
Right.
But it often can be as complex as any area.
It is probably the most challenging practice area because a lot of people look at it like it's just fill in the blank. Is the driving there? Is the blood alcohol level there? And there's so much more to it. And really the toxicology aspect is where you've got to have a command of the material. You can't just be a lawyer. You've got to be a toxicologist.
Right. And we with our technology today, we have a phone and we send a text and we expect somebody to get it right away. And we just assume that that's the case, right?
Yeah, that's true. Right.
And we also assume that when we're told this person came in and breathed into this box and a number popped out, that
game over.
Of course that can happen, right?
Right. And out of all the things Frank was awesome at in terms of being a criminal defense attorney and going after expert witnesses or other witnesses, that was never really something that he commanded. And I remember after the Holland trial, it was so depressing for me to get the guilty verdict, but you gotta move on and deal with it. And I was sitting in CDAM, the Criminal Defense Attorneys of Michigan, November fall conference in Traverse City, and I hear 3 lawyers from the National College for DUI Defense, Patrick Barone, Donald Ramsell from Illinois, Patrick's from Birmingham, Michigan, and Jim Nessie from Arizona, talking about DUI defense and how to defend a DUI and issue spotting and toxicology and learning how to become an expert. And I thought, that is probably the most difficult area of forensic science that I could possibly get into. And if I master that, I can master pretty much anything. And that's where that thought popped into my head.
Yes, you can.
Yes, I can.
Yes, you can. You believed in yourself.
Yes, I can. And I said to Wendy, because she was with me, I said that night, I think I'm going to become a DUI lawyer. I think I'm going to focus on that.
Some 19 years ago.
Yes. And she said, remember, you don't like to lose.
Yeah, I mean, but you've won your share of cases.
Right.
And throughout that, DUI, you have written the book on DUI, you continue to update it. But motor vehicle cases in general, you have, I wouldn't say perfected, but you become a master in that analysis and the black box and toxicology issues and dealing with forensic toxicologists.
And the law that applies to the road. There's a lot of civil law that comes into play in like a moving violation causing death case. So this is just somebody's driving. Maybe you forget to use your turn signal to make a lane change. You're not being menacing. There's no malice there, but somehow a really bad accident happens and somebody dies. That's a criminal charge.
Right.
And trying those cases, because some people just got to go to trial on them because A, I don't think I committed a crime. B, I'll lose my license for a year, which is the collateral penalty in a Michigan case. Those are really stressful because it's like that 3-foot putt when you're trying to make the last birdie of the round.
Right.
You don't want to miss that. You don't want to screw that up.
Right.
I mean, the last one I did, I told myself I'm not going to do any more of these because it was just so stressful. I'm in court in St. Joe. This is 2022. And every day I walk in there and I put my palms on the defense table and I'd lift them up and I would see the sweat stains from my palms on the table. I mean, that's just how stressful that is. That case was a not guilty, and thank God, because it was a horrible accident, but that man did not deserve to get a conviction on his record.
And still to this day, as much as you've mastered, there's still learning and improving to do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we talked about a case that maybe I was going to take and have you do it with me so I could learn from you this particular area of the law.
And we've done other cases. Where do you see yourself over the next 10 years? Besides, don't tell me retirement because you're too young for that and too good at what you do. But
I think a lot about that. And, at 57 and doing this for 25 and a half years, I think, okay, what's next?
Right.
There's got to be something next, something where that skill set is going to translate, and maybe God's just going to put me in somebody's path, and that's going to turn into the next practice area,
Well, we're looking forward to the next story. They're telling me we've done our hour, so this went by really quick.
Right.
We're going to have to get you back on.
Right, absolutely. Can we do it at Sidebar with a couple of drafts?
We can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Thanks
All
for
right.
coming on the show.
Thanks, man.